Once you have done the learning solution design, the next step is to do the learning content development. Now this is a very interesting step because a lot of people start seeing the content that you create and they start giving a lot of comments on it. So every bit of content that is being done has to somewhere stitch into the design. There are various elements of the content. So what are the few elements that you have to look at? You have to look at the quizzes that you will use to test the knowledge at some point of time, not exactly giving it as a test, but as a quiz. Don't ever threaten the participant in the learning process. Having looked at the quizzes, you have to look at the curriculum. You look at the slides in case it's an instructor-led training. Then you look at the workbook. Then you look at the courseware if you are giving separate reading material. You have to look at the pre-read. You have to look at the post-session. So several such small pieces are there of the content which all needs to stitch together. And while you're looking at all the content, you also have to look out the way in which the whole delivery will happen. What I've found very useful when I've been working with instructional designers and content developers is that I look at it as a 4-box quadrant, and when you're designing content, look at it into take two views. First is the industry, and the other axis you have got the role or the level. So if you're designing content, always first see that is the industry known to me. You might have worked in that organization or have done content for such an organization before, or is the industry unknown? Next is the role for which you are developing. Is the role known to me? Maybe you have done regional managers workshops before, so you know the role, you know the kind of stress and strain that a regional manager goes through, what is his whole job all about. Of course, industry to industry it will change. The next is that is the role unknown to me? It's senior management or a frontline sales kind of a thing, which a person might not have done. Or it might be manufacturing, and and a content developer might not have exposure to manufacturing totally. So you have to look at industry, you have to look at role, you might also look at function, different ways to look at the whole thing. But this will give you a good idea about the whole thing. And now obviously when you're looking at the box of unknown industry, unknown role, this is the most difficult content that you will be developing. Because you, as a content developer, you have to really learn a lot before you start putting your thoughts together. It's a known industry, known content. This is a quick win. Not an issue. Within some 3-4 hours, you should be able to put some good content together. Unknown role, but known industry. I think it's a simple challenge. It is a challenge, but it's a simple challenge. And the last is a known role, but an unknown industry. This is also a challenge, but a little bit more complex challenge. Obviously, what it means to say is that as a content developer, you then need to know 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different things before you about the industry and the role before you actually start putting this content together for that particular industry. If it is an unknown kind of a thing that you are dealing with, be very clear. If you don't have a subject matter expert who's good to guide you, never even take this appointment up. This opportunity will be making a mess otherwise. In both the unknowns, wherever you are in the unknown quadrant, always see you got a good subject matter expert to lead you in. Of course, if it's unknown industry, unknown role, your time required as a content developer to understand the whole thing and then be able to design something about it will be much higher. I've seen people who get into the training session without having much exposure about the industry or the role, and then try to put things together using the trainer knowledge and all, which I think is a very shoddy way to do the things. If as a content designer you are not very comfortable with the content yourself, it will never be able to deliver the objectives. Now, having dealt with these two pieces, now you look at the various knowledge elements. There are three things that we see in content: knowledge, skills, and the behavioral perspectives that you want to change through the content. Knowledge, as a content developer, you need to have constantly be in touch with cutting edge knowledge. So you need to read a lot of books, You need to read a lot of articles, a lot of Harvard Business Reviews, absolutely cutting edge, so that your knowledge related to content as well as industry, various industries, is really, really good. If you are not doing this, someday or the other you will not be able to compete. You'll not be able to meet the expectations of your employer. Or if you're self-employed, you won't be able to rise up the value chain. Next is skills. When you're designing for skills, you have to look at the adequate amount of role plays, adequate amount of skill practice sessions that you put in, whichever way. It might be simulations, it might be whatever. So you need to give adequate amount of exposure to the various skilling techniques, so that all of this is delivered with sufficient amount of practice. And if you're dealing with behavioral, this is where I find it very difficult, because you have to understand the why is a person behaving a way he is. Now this needs a lot of time. Behaviors, why is the person's behavior the way it is, how should it change? And it's not, I am telling you kind of a way which will help him change the behavior. So you need to really spend a lot of time. And behavioral programs, every program that you do, whether it's selling, whether it is a managerial capability, anything, you'll have to handle all of these three perspectives in it. A content developer necessarily has to be a very, very well-read person. If you're not reading constantly, if you're not upgrading your capability constantly, somewhere or the other you will hit the ceiling. And that's when they hit the ceiling and they are at a lack of knowledge, that's when this programs start getting designed around games plus what do you call it, psychometric profiles, plus a little of inputs. A very, very disastrous recipe overall. It will never help meet the objective of the program, as I have explained earlier. So whenever I see a program design which is largely a game and a psychometric tool and an inputs and then a lot of facilitation, the thought in my mind is that maybe the content developer has run out of ideas then. So now, having got all these pieces together, this again is not easy. But once you've got all these pieces together, you have to organize them in a format which someone else can also deliver a session on. That also requires you to have very good writing skills. So if you are unable to write well, somewhere in the content development process, a content developer goes into the cut, copy, paste approach, which again doesn't work. This can again sustain for a very short time, but over a period of time it will fail. So well-read, knowledgeable person, writing skills, is able to understand all these complexities across industry, across roles. Such a content developer, when he is dedicating his time and energy, will be able to give good learning content. And good learning content is one which is able to meet the objectives of a session, of a learning intervention. And it is also the one which helps, on which feedback is never the criteria, but how quickly your batch gets filled up. How quickly your batch fills up without any pressures on the participant is the criteria. If you say that, yeah, before your appraisal, if you haven't done these learning programs, you can't get appraised this year and therefore your increments will stop, I think that's a very pathetic way to get your batch to be filled up. Your batch should fill up because of the merit of the content that you teach in that particular program. If your batch is not filling up and you've got issues, don't try to put force on the learner. Understand that either the course that you have designed does not meet his requirements, or something is grossly wrong. So rather than hiding behind the muck below the carpet, it's very important for you to face the fact and redesign your content. Look at yourself as a content designer. Whenever there is an issue related to batch filling up, look at yourself, and there might be an issue somewhere with the content that you're designing rather than with the participant. Learning content development is a very, very involved work. You need to know the role, you need to know the industry, you need to know various other aspects. You need to read a lot, you need to write a lot. And only when you are doing all these over years will you be able to refine yourself, will you be able to have a large repository with yourself, which you can, and you can also keep on creating customized material for the client. So learn a lot, read a lot, and enjoy content development process.